Good evening, everyone out there in the interwebs. We are back here on Fighting the Void with another episode, and today we are going to be talking about matters pertaining to the end of Western civilization as we know it. So, I am Ginger, and with me today is Jake. He has been on here before when we were talking about the replicability crisis in some of the various sciences, especially social and medical sciences. And today we're going to talk about, I know I said the end of Western civilization as we know it, but we're not going to be talking about, the right guns and ammo and, the food and everything should be prepping for. No, we're taking a slightly different angle on this today. And we're going to be discussing the concept of microcultures. What is a microculture, you ask? Essentially, you are probably already part of one thanks to social media to one degree or another. If you were in a DM room where you all talk about a certain subject, that is kind of an example of microculture. Other examples would be a group of a common example actually be like your average garage band is a little bit of an example of a microculture. However, obviously, we're talking about something a little weighty or a little bit more substantial than that. Essentially, it's finding your tribe, finding a group of people with some sort with a like-minded worldview and sets of skills and everything that can help preserve and promote some of the best elements of Western culture that are available to us today, and again, help preserve it during whatever it is that's coming next, because whatever's coming next is not a return to life as we knew it before. So, Jake, first of all, thanks for coming on to help discuss this.
No problem.
Otherwise, this is going to be me talking into the camera, and I don't know how much people really want that. Having somebody to talk with always makes it a little more interesting. So, and of course, we were going back and forth about it a little bit on Twitter. So, first of all, does this concept of microculture, does this in general make sense to you? And how would you envision such a thing happening?
Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense to me. So a little bit kind of about my, I guess I'll start about like my I guess social, political journey in the last probably 5 years or so has been really interesting to me. It's out there on my Twitter bio, on my Facebook. I put it when I really felt the strong change. I put under political affiliation or beliefs or whatever. If you look, it says Christian nationalist.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So and nationalism kind of has a dirty word connotation in the political sphere nowadays, and so people, a lot of people kind of lend it to that. And so what does that mean to be a nationalist? And it kind of plays into what we're talking about, right? Because a nation, if you dissect the Latin, right, is from birth, basically. Mm-hmm. That's what it means, right. From birth, right? Mm-hmm. So it's talking about it's talking about that group or tribe that you mentioned before, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it's talking about. So I came to the realization that when you have different cultures and identities in the same state, it's very, very difficult for them to work together.
Yeah.
Right. Because different people, different tribes have different mindset, different traditions, different outlooks, and that tends to lead people to want and different things and think different things. Right. Mm-hmm. You can't, like, if you were to take the nation of England and put it in France and take France and put it in England, the French wouldn't magically become English and the English wouldn't magically become France, right?
exactly.
right? They live the way they were used to living for the last 2,000 years, however long you want to go back. But
Mhm.
so this microculture thing is really does make a lot of sense, and I think it is the way humans kind of tend to go and live together, and to end up living.
We tend to, in a certain sense, do this naturally. We atomize a little bit. We go and find our tribe. We form individual. We form individual associations and whatnot. Think of like your Lions Club, the Knights of Columbus, things like that. These are all certain examples of that, where you've got people like-minded worldview, like-minded goals and everything, and they want to join together to accomplish more than they possibly could themselves. These are all examples. We do this naturally. Independent, non-governmental associations, if you will, that help organize and govern our lives, which is one of the fact that there were so many of these so prevalent in the early days of America, and really probably up until the post-World War II era. That's one of the things that actually helped make America great, was all of these different independent microcultures that still worked together overall to help build a better, stronger America without even necessarily trying to do so. It just sort of happened, it sort of gelled. Now, that was because there was a lot more in common across all of these different things than there was different. And that gets into a whole other thing that we'll probably get into here over the course of the hour. Now, what got me really thinking about this was actually I was talking to my oldest daughter. She's very much into music, and she was talking about how one of the orchestras and everything in my state was canceling their whole fall season. And it occurred to me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is, obviously an orchestra, a symphony, they promote a certain aspect of culture. Music is a very important part of any culture. And I got thinking about, it's okay, there's that. Who knows when movie theaters are going to reopen? Sports are kind of coming back, but they've been so horribly politicized now that it's not going to be the same. There's just no way. Even if all the people get back in the stands, it's still not going to be the same. That sports have now become another area of division for American society. They're trying to destroy basically anything that we can do together as a group of people, unless it's protesting the country. There's places, again, where churches aren't supposed to be open. I was just talking to somebody at my church earlier today, and they were saying how they were getting comments like, why are you people singing in church? You shouldn't be doing that. I was like, really? But I wasn't really surprised, because I know there's all of these insufferable idiots out there. And I just like, this situation where you've got the left taking maximum advantage of this crisis. They are following Rahm Emanuel's doctrine to the freaking T right now. They are not letting this crisis go to waste, and they are literally trying to destroy the last vestiges of common culture that we have as a society. We don't have much. We didn't have much anyway. I mean, let's think about some of the examples I've listed. They're sort of like the last gasps of common culture that still existed. And I think it's definitely time, one, to recognize reality that we don't have a solid common culture across this country anymore. We haven't for a long time. Two, it's time to start rebuilding real culture again at the local level. Not just on social media, although social media can be important for this. Certainly, it's nice to know that there are other like-minded people out there, even if they're not close enough to get together locally for those purposes. It's nice to know that they exist. Like You and I, we're part of a certain example of this right now with the book club discussions that we do that eventually will be going live. I promise. Eventually they'll be getting out there. We're actually on it's our third book, right?
I think so.
Yes. Yeah. So we're doing a third book. They're all archived right now and everything. So eventually you're going to get a massive glut of content from us. Don't worry. But that's an example of using social media to do that. Now, this is going to be, of course, a difficult thing. A good model, actually, is the young Karol Wojtyła, who you people may know more as Pope John Paul II. He and his friends, during the Nazi and then Soviet occupation of Poland, they actually led an underground theater troupe that the whole purpose was to help preserve Polish culture because of course one of the goals of any hostile occupation, as though there's a friendly occupation anyway, of any occupying force, if they are really trying to subjugate a people, they try to destroy their culture. They try to destroy any sort of identity that is separate from the governing power. That's why that's one of the biggest reasons that every dictatorship tries to destroy religion that is apart from the state. They either try to impose a state religion or destroy religion altogether. That's just how it works. If you can destroy the people's religion, you will destroy any sort of independent thought from the state. Just kind of how it works. At the very least, the communists and the Nazis were extremely convinced of this.
It's true.
Whether you agree or not, this is what they thought, and this is exactly what they tried to do. And the young Wojtyła recognized this, and along with his friends, and tried to preserve it. This is an example of something that we can do, and try to preserve Western culture as a whole. Now, Jake, I've been monologuing here for a little bit, dominating the conversation.
All right. It's all right. It is your podcast. So,
let's give you a chance here. What are some potential cons of this concept?
So, the potential cons of trying to build a culture, I think. So I think that I guess it's not necessarily a con, but a hurdle, I would say, to this would be it's more difficult from the mindset that a lot of people have today, right? Yeah. And again, part of my social political evolution was the understanding that it's not about inclusivity.
Right.
Exclusivity is actually a very good thing. Mm-hmm. I was just looking at I saw it on Twitter. I was scrolling through, and I saw, I don't know if who knows Razor Fist, but he's very edgy. So if you don't like profanity, I wouldn't check him out. No. But he has a lot. He's very, very intelligent, actually, for all his vulgarity. Yes. And he was talking about how people whining about Parler being an echo chamber, and saying that, got news for you, Twitter's pretty much the same thing too. And so I think that, and I retweeted it with a comment, and I said, it's a fool. Basically, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it up, but it's basically a fool's errand to want to talk to people talk to people that you disagree with on a fundamental worldview level, in order to claim that you're not in an echo chamber, because there's no point in arguing with insanity. Right. And I'm not saying that, that in these lefties, some of them, if they want to be in a society that behaves this way and can function this way, more power to them. They can be in that society, but it's functionally the same thing, right? If I can't, if I'm speaking gibberish to you, stuff that just doesn't make sense on a fundamental level, then there isn't going to be anything that changes your mind or my mind. I can't argue you out of insanity, and vice versa, right? You can't argue me out of insanity.
Right. Now,
yeah.
Like you're saying, like most people, if you say I'm a Christian nationalist, people go, "Oh, so you're a theocratic fascist."
Right.
Yeah, that's the first thing that most people are going to jump to. You're speaking, as you said, you're almost speaking a completely different language.
Right.
And this happens in numerous different contexts. It's not only when talking, when speaking about matters of politics, it's also speaking matters of religion. One of the most important, one of the hardest things I find when debating people on religion is making sure we're actually using, because a lot of times we'll use the same terms, but very often we'll be using them in a different way. Like to use an example from a DM group that I'm a part of, if a Calvinist and a Catholic are using the words predestination, well, it's the same word, but we mean different things by it. So you have to really define those terms before you even get into it. And sometimes you can't even do that. If you're going into it with, if you're going into the conversation with, this person's an evil heretic and is going to hell, well, you're not listening to them define their terms anyway. Or if in the modern political terms, that person's a Nazi, well, they're not going to listen to you define your terms. They're not going to listen to you elaborate on what you mean by Christian nationalist. They've already decided you're a Nazi. So right. I guess you're saying like a hurdle is we're going to have to resist that urge to build. We're going to have to resist the urge to build the big tent.
Yes. Like the big tent, the big tent philosophy sounds great. But again, at a fundamental level, like it comes with the realization, like why I was never a libertarian in the first place, because I always understood, I guess, that you can't take a person out of the context of their society and their culture. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I was never a libertarian, because libertarian, much actually like communism, tends to be a utopian view where they view everybody as the same, and everybody isn't the same. No. And we don't want the same things. No. And we don't want this. So that's the exclusivity is a good thing, because it doesn't do any good for me to invite you to live in the community because you don't think that I should, because we both don't think that we should force people to, let's use a relevant thing. We both don't think that we should force somebody to wear masks, right? We both don't think that. But if you're say a open homosexual who encourages other people to, and is, I guess, an evangelistic homosexual, right. I don't want to really be in the same community, right, and the same culture as you. We may agree on this one thing, but where that intersects is tangential. Whereas, you and I probably agree on probably 70 to 80% of most things. Right. So living with you in a community is going to be much easier than living with that, the other example that I had,
Right.
So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also important to point out that just because we're not necessarily interested in building the big tent, it doesn't mean that the tents can't form alliances where it's logical to do so. For example, to use the example that you gave, it's like I got no trouble making common cause with the evangelistic homosexual when it comes to who is also against forcing people to wear masks when it comes to forcing people to wear masks.
Right.
But that just means we might show up at the same protest. We might donate to the same politician on this particular issue. We might sign the same petitions. We might even actively promote said thing together. However, that doesn't mean we're moving into each other's tents.
Right.
We're just going, hey, I see you've got that sign up. I also have a similar sign. Should we, collaborate on that maybe? That'd be cool. Just like, as I said, the independent associations, the various groups and whatnot that kind of formed the fabric of America, again, up until the post-World War II era, really did sort of the same thing. They were their own individual organizations. You had the individual country club. You had, the Knights of Columbus, or the local sewing group, whatever.
Right.
Pick any number of these things. They were their own separate things, but they also, where it was logical, would form alliances, and they certainly weren't, as a rule, antagonistic with each other. They didn't have to be. They were. Please go ahead.
Oh, well, so it kind of brings some of the line you're saying with all these like intersecting groups, and right. So I think like they've done studies, and you open this with the talking about the replicability crisis. So whenever you mention studies, you have to take it with a grain of salt. But they've done studies on like the number of associations that a person can hold, right? And it works out to be like 124 associations that you can have where you know a person relatively well, right?
I see. Yeah.
And so that kind of mindset that forms the nucleus kind of your tribe, if you will, mm-hmm. right? That 124 people, which, for example, like there's a besides the massive workload on a submarine, there's about 120 to 130 people, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of an ancillary reason why not a lot of us have associations outside of the submarine, because all of our 124 associations are mostly taken up by the group of people that we work with, right? And we spend 3.5 out of 4 years with, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So the what that comes into is how you build a larger framework for community beyond that would be like, I know John and I are members of the local golf club together, and we golf, and so he's one of my 124, but not all of our 124 intersect. So if John has a good has a good friend that's outside my group, then he kind of de facto vouches for that person as kind of part of the extended tribe, if you will, right? Part of my extended tribe. So that's kind of how I think that you build, larger frameworks, and how larger frameworks, build together.
Yeah.
But the more removed you get from that, the harder it is to have something that holds you in common, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And organizations like churches and stuff like that and stuff too, and to a large extent, that's why the left attacks churches so hard, is because they do foster the sense of community, of like-minded people.
They form a nucleus of associations that is independent of the state or of work.
Right, and that's like, for example, Western civilization used to be called Christendom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so was you had many different nations that warred with each other
Mhm.
in Europe for hundreds of years, right? But but they did have a larger identity that held them together under the banner of Christ,
Mhm.
that enabled them to do things like, resist the Muslims in France, and
Mhm.
then take the fight to the Muslims to kind of push back and to say, hey, we are what we are, and we are going to resist and fight you.
Right.
Yeah, sure, sometimes we fight each other, and we don't get along, and we're not always together on all the issues.
Right.
But in the end, we're not going to let this existential threat to everybody, all of us, stand, and we're going to fight. We're going to come together to fight against it, right?
Mhm.
So, and so while the European nations, I don't think they weren't a nation in and of themselves, they did have a common thread that a loose common thread that kind of held them together. And then the smaller you get, like, oh, I'm French, oh, I'm Burgundian, oh,
Mhm.
I'm whatever, or oh, I'm English, oh,
Yeah.
I'm from York, that. And the stronger bond the smaller bond you have, the stronger it is, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah,
So, and
absolutely.
yeah.
Now, I think on a practical level, one of the reasons why this concept interests me is because, like I said, the culture of Western civilization is being destroyed before our very eyes, and again, has been for a long time. So, I think one of the things we should be doing is finding people in our tribe, within our network, within our people who have similar worldview, whether that's our churches or whatever else we happen to find. Uh, we need to start actually actively doing things to promote things that are important for culture. Like, we're going to have to actually form our own independent symphony orchestras.
Right.
Are they going to be up to the par of the Berlin Philharmonic? No. But we're going to have to do it. Otherwise, we're going to lose this. We are going to lose these treasures of our civilization that have been passed down. We need to actually, you know what? We're going to need our own independent theater troops that might actually be illegal here soon. And may already be in some places. I don't know. And actually start running around, reenacting Shakespeare and stuff. People going around and making sure that actually, not just that people have a dusty copy of Dante on their shelves, but that they've actually read the dang thing.
Right.
Things like that. Actual, and not just, and I think this is really important. This is where a lot of Christians drop the ball. It can't only be preservation. Preservation is good. Preservation is necessary. But we also have to continue to develop.
Right.
We can't just go and take our instruments and everything, pull them out, and do our garage band orchestras, and just play the works of Beethoven and Mozart and everything over and over again. No. We're gonna need more than that. We're gonna need to actually continue to stand on the shoulders of those giants and see if we can build a little bit farther, build a little differently. We actually have to remember to be creative as we're going up, because that's part of Western culture too. That's part of our civilization. It's once upon a time, Mozart was virtually a radical. was a radical with the way that he was experimenting. Once upon a time, everything that is old and great and timeless in our culture was brand new.
Yeah.
And we need to remember that. We need to remember to continue to develop, not be afraid to do something new. A lot of that might crash and burn. And that's fine. That's how you wind up figuring out how to make the new classics. How to make the new thing that will last 500 years into the future.
Yeah, I think that it's important to it's important to seek out and support the art that is produced by people you fundamentally agree with. Like, for example, Nick Cole and Jason Absnatch.
I don't know the latter, but I do know Nick Cole.
Yeah, two authors, right? They've done an amazing job, and I'm only in the 4th book, but of the series. But I've done an amazing.
Is this that? Oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it.
Galaxy's Edge.
Galaxy's Edge. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Galaxy. So they've put together a Star Wars, not Star Wars. That's Galaxy's Edge, right? And you know, and Nick Cole is a very solid Christian, very you know, very right. You know, and so you know, supporting that. You know, supporting him is important.
Yes.
Right. Because he's an extremely talented author. And you know, so finding those people that you also agree with and supporting them is going to be, sometimes it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard to find. You know, you might have to search. Like, you might have to search, oh, you know, what in my area is there a you know, like the garage band orchestra that you were talking about? What what is that? And can I you know, what can I do to promote and help that? It's important, you know, it's important to find and promote that art and that culture, because I think we've, in today's world, we've kind of we've kind of thought that if our society is divided, that's a bad thing. When it's like, and when I say divided, I mean, like, you know, different states, and I'm going back to Europe a lot because it's a good example. So like the European nations, there was never a unified European government, right? There was never a European, and all this, you know, culture and wealth and you know, all this culture and wealth and knowledge and stuff came from this fractious, warring, you know, society that you know, that fought with each other all the time, fought outside of it all the time, until it ended up conquering the world.
They had a common culture, which was based on a common religion.
Right. So, you know, but they had enough differences to keep them all, that kept them all separate, right?
Right.
So that's kind of what I'm getting at. Just because you're not you're not completely unified under the same, you know, we kind of talked about it earlier. You know, you cannot be totally unified and in lockstep on everything. And you can be very separate, but still come together when it counts.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you're the example you brought up with Christendom finally getting its act together and actually fighting back the Muslim Ottoman hordes, which is a thing. The Crusades were defensive people. We literally sat on our butts with our thumbs up our rear ends, just spinning in circles until they were at the gates of Vienna in Austria. We let them kick us out of the Middle East. We let them kick us out of North Africa, and we waited to actually get our act together until they were at the gates of Vienna. And fortunately, the Poles and the Winged Hussars came to the rescue and beat them back. And finally, we got some crusades launched that actually pushed them back quite a ways. And until actually they got their act back together, and we got distracted with stupid stuff like, hey, we're not getting along with Byzantium anymore. Let's go ahead and sack them. That sounds like a good idea, idiots. But you had other, of course, examples. So this gets into a whole nother thing with the Reconquista and everything. And lots of different things there, but that's a whole separate episode or two.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's it's a lot of complex history in those in
Whoa,
that time frame.
yes. Lots of room for everybody to be like, bad calls were made, mistakes were made.
Yeah.
Anywho's.
Yeah.
So back to the subject at hand. This is hardly a new concept. It's been done before, and a lot of this also is a retreating from pop culture in a way. It's going to involve a retreat from trying to fit in with mainstream society. That's been one of the things that Christians especially have done, have been far too concerned with since at least the 60s. Was fitting in with mainstream with mainstream American society. Once upon a time we were mainstream American society, but then there started to be a rather radical shift, and we thought that we could control the shift by sort of, in a way, going along with it, by swimming along with the stream a little bit. Well, that hasn't served us very well. We've become the stream. We've just, rather than hoping to swim along with it a little ways and come out the other side, we've gotten swept along with the stream. We're gonna have to pull away from it a bit, and this has been done before. Have you heard of the Benedict option?
No, I've not.
Okay, this is a thing. It started getting promoted by Rod Dreher. He's a very conservative columnist. He was a Protestant, became Catholic. Now he's Eastern Orthodox. Very complicated. But he put out a book a few years ago called The Benedict Option, which it has that name because it's named after Saint Benedict back in the day. During the Roman Empire was, of course, a wretched hive of scum and villainy. And he just was like, okay, I've had enough of Rome. I'm leaving. I'm out of here. This culture is beyond saving. I'm out of here. So he went to go live in the caves outside of Rome. But word of his holiness and everything got out. And before you know it, other young men were joining him. Before you know it, they had too many people to live in the cave. They had to build what became a monastery. It became a whole religious order, now typically known as the Benedictines. That religious order preserved and promoted the greatness of Christendom and helped restore the entire culture, first by leaving it, and then eventually becoming sufficiently attractive that people were like, oh my gosh, this is what we've left. This is what we've left behind. Look how far we've fallen from this ideal. And people returned to it. It literally saved Christendom. So the idea of the Benedict option is kind of, we're at a point where we may need to do the same thing. We may need to retreat for a while and build ourselves back up in order to save the culture.
Yeah.
Or restore the culture.
So it's kind of interesting. I was watching I was watching on YouTube one of Milo Yiannopoulos and his interview with it was a recent interview that he had with a professor Rachel Fulton Brown. Okay. Who has got a lot of cool stuff. And one of the things they were talking about was that there's this desire, I think, a lot of in some of my generation, and it seems like a lot of the Gen Zers, is that they want to like check out of the cities, check out of this, and while in some aspects that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I don't really want to be part of the city life myself, even though I am in a suburban central here in Hampton, Virginia. But you can't have civilization without cities. the root of the word civilization, it has partly to do with city. So you need kind of that nexus, that nexus, like Rome had Rome, obviously.
Yeah.
England had London, obviously. France has Paris, obviously. They're their greatest
Right.
their greatest cities, right? Berlin for the Germans, right? So you need kind of in order to have a culture that can defend and preserve itself, you do need those, like I said, those unifying aspects, right? So you do kind of, and you need those cultural centers where people and ideas and art forms and stuff can all be exchanged, so that you can have that forward progress that we talked about earlier, right? So you have to have cities. You like, we're not all going to be what Thomas, we're not all going to be Thomas Jefferson's dream of, every one of us having a farm on the,
it's unlikely we're all going to be Southern agrarians. Yeah.
Right. So we're not going to have that. So we do need those cities, and we do need those epicenters and those congregations, those focal points of culture, so that we can get those. Because you don't have Mozart if everybody's working a farm on the thing. You don't have him. You don't have Beethoven. You don't have trying to think of a you don't have Rembrandt. You don't have Michelangelo. You don't have these people without those cities. So it's important to remember that, even if you want to distance yourself, that's still something we need, but we need to concentrate on growing that back where we want it, positioning it back to where we want it. And then as part of what you said, we need to push, we need to go on the offensive. William F. Buckley's line does not work. The standing athwart history is saying no. That's a losing strategy. That's a strategy for losers.
Honestly, yes. Looking at the present state of politics, looking at the overall track of the Republican Party, yes, that is frankly, I increasingly see it as a ridiculous position.
It is.
The idea that you could just sit there and saying no or slow down, or it's like, no, that's not right. I increasingly see that style, at the very least, of conservatism as being weak at best.
Oh yeah.
It's like, no, you're not even necessarily trying to conserve anything. You're just wanting to keep things the way they are isn't a proper thing of conservatism, because the way things are might suck.
Right. It's the what I call conservatives, because obviously I don't consider myself a conservative anymore. Is they're too concerned with making sure their bow ties are perfectly straight.
Right. Now it was Chesterton. He pointed out that even keeping something the same, in truth, requires constant acts of renewal. A White House doesn't stay white by itself. It needs to be repainted repeatedly.
Right.
It needs to be refreshed. It needs to be renewed. And our culture, Western civilization, is in desperate need of renewal. Is in desperate need of a new paint job, because holy crap, you can't even tell that the house used to be white.
Right. Yeah.
Which isn't a racial thing. It's a color of paint, people. Get over it.
Yeah. That is it's really important. Like, as Christians, we all have to understand that everything in this world is fallen. And as both of us having a somewhat scientific background, especially in the nuclear field, where we learn about thermodynamics, what do all systems tend to do? Entropy. All systems tend to decay. And a fallen world, all systems tend towards decay. So that the quote is absolutely perfect, because that's what you have to do. You have to be aggressive in fighting for what you're, and fighting to keep the culture, which is why, the previous generations, even the greatest, the silents, and the boomers, and kind of my generation too, because although the greatest, the silents, and the boomers, they kind of bought into this lie that everything was going to be perpetually good forever from here on out. Like we won the World War, everything's coming up roses, and everything's going to be staying roses to the point to where we started to leverage our the boomers really started it, to leverage their children's futures in order to keep their prosperity of today. And that's why everybody, that's why a lot of us make fun of the boomers and have a dislike for them, is because as a generation, obviously, hashtag not all, right? Is because that's kind of what they did. And in my generation, and they grew up lying to my generation, the millennials, about this. And a lot of us bought into it, but a lot of us millennials see that that is literally untenable, because we're living in the untenable result of what happened previously. And a lot of my generation, much more than I like, which is my generation, kind of sucks too, kind of are just stamping our foots and throwing a tantrum because things can't be the way that we were told that they could be.
Right.
And then that's why I think that the next year, like my kids are going to kind of grow up with a more mindset of, okay, this kind of sucks, so how can we make things better? But to tie that in back into the cultural things, that is all why you have to keep those like associations and those microcultures. That's why you have to keep them, and you have to fight aggressively to keep them as quote unquote pure as they started out with, because if you don't, they're gonna tend towards decay, and you get like what the school system is now, where it's a bunch of, I got a buddy in college who is sending me videos that his professor puts up, and is like, how the professor is talking about how Christianity is socialism, and how, he's wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt and talking about, racism is fundamental to the United States, and all this stuff. You get, we didn't get there by happenstance. It wasn't like all the professors woke up one day and decided, oh, we're super radical communists who want to tear down the very fabric of the nation that was the country that was built. It was the long march through the institutions, right? So so we have to be vigilant in keeping all our cultures, those little microcultures that we have into that, right? Like, being, recognizing that again, it's about exclusivity. It's not about inclusivity. You want to make sure that people meet your standards, because if they don't meet your standards, then the standards are just going to keep lowering until they're at the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's a lot of there's definitely other pitfalls, because on the one side of wanting to build too big of a tent, we can also make ourselves too rigid.
Right.
And that's where you get into, like I was saying, you're concerned only with preserving. It's like, this is the best stuff ever. Why would you ever want to do anything different? It's like, because, okay, yes, that is amazing. That is great. It may, in fact, be the best thing ever. It may be the best thing possible. That's entirely true. However, that you can't just keep repeating that, because that's not what we're made to. Like Tolkien said, we are made to be sub-creators. We are made to make things. And if we stop doing that, if we just concern ourselves only with preservation, that will generate its own backlash. That will create its own entropy.
Right.
And it will lead to its own decay. That will lead to a fall of the restoration before it even really begins. Now, there's of course another pitfall. These microcultures, these different groups and everything. It is entirely likely, especially as the wider culture, the wider civilization we know as Western civilization or just American civilization, continues to fall apart, and I believe it will continue to fall apart, regardless of what we do, at least in the near term and in probably the medium term as well. These different microcultures, as they continue to solidify and grow, they will eventually bump up against each other in one way, shape, or form. They will come into conflict, especially if they take on certain geographical associations, which I fully expect they will. In fact, I would advocate for it.
Oh, yeah.
If you've got, again, your group of, for you, LDS is largely centered in Utah anyway, not exclusively, but largely. If there's a strong Catholic group, I believe, still in Gallup, New Mexico, and there are other areas where you can find a lot of actually serious Catholics where they're concentrated around in particular areas. As these grow, they will come into conflict with other places. Hopefully it's strictly ideological. It's in matters of debate. It's in matters of, okay, which laws should govern this particular area and everything. But especially if we do go through a more or less total societal collapse in the near future, they will come into physical conflict as well. It's just going to happen. That is one of the potential downsides with this thing, but I also don't see a way around that.
No, neither do I. I think we will, I think in the rather near future, I guess medium, I don't know how, in the next.
And how do you define that,
Yeah. But I think we're definitely going to see, when we get to that point where we're actually start separating, you're going to see wars. You are, it's part of the, again, we're in the fallen world, right? It's part of the human condition, inevitable. We're gonna see that conflict eventually erupt fully. But hopefully it can be minimized. Hopefully we can, the transitions and stuff can be as much peaceful. And to your earlier point that definitely exclusivity can be a problem, right? It absolutely can. The reason that I harp about inclusivity or exclusivity right now is because that's not our problem right now, right?
No, I completely agree.
I just want to make that clear, because I'm not, because even I don't disagree that you can get stratification and society can be too rigid, and you can't growth, and then the society just can't sustain and falls apart. But the problem right now is we're still at the idea of, oh, hey, everybody can be part of everything, and that's an untenable situation. But then further, I totally agree. I think geographic area is going to be a big importance. It's funny because while I'm not exclusionist, right? The people that tend to personality traits. I'm gonna talk about this, and people, it's out here on the internet now. Everybody's going to take it out of context. I'm not a genetic determinist. I don't think, but I will say that it tends to, the people who behave similarly tend to look similar, right? And I'm talking about more than just, skin tone.
Okay.
Right? I'm talking about, English people have a certain look to them. French people have a certain look to them. Polish people have a certain look to them, right?
Yeah,
and
fair.
and I'm not saying, and again, I'm not saying that everybody can't, that you can't have people who, a Polish person who will fit way better in France than than he does in Poland, because you do get that. Every society has their quote unquote black sheep that don't that aren't like the rest of the people, and that that fit better other places, right? So I think that while it's a component, don't be afraid. And I say this because people now, I think, are kind of afraid to put something like that out there, right? They're afraid.
What the hell are you doing opening up that can of worms with just a few minutes left, man?
Right. I just want, and it's with that, it's that I don't want people shouldn't be afraid to be like, oh, there's a lot of I'm with a lot of white people, or I'm with a lot of black people, or I'm with a lot of Hispanics, or I'm with a lot of Asians, or whatever. You shouldn't be afraid to be like, all these people fit with me better. And sure, we all happen to look the same, but does that really matter if we create a society that's cohesive and that gets along with each other and that's stable, right?
Now that said, I also, on the other side of that, I also feel like I've got a lot more in common with a bunch of people in Hong Kong right now fighting for their rights than I do with some of my next door neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, when you bring in that kind of, when you bring up what I said, it can definitely lead into a can of worms, and people start, taking things out of, making gigantic assumptions and generalizations. And, again, there are people, there are people that you agree with and disagree with across a vast spectrum. There's many white people that I avidly disagree with, and I'm sure there's a ton of black people that I absolutely agree with on culture and society and stuff. But I just want to, again, we get repeated. It's another one of those mantras, diversity is our strength. Diversity is our strength. That gets repeated in the culture.
Why?
Yeah, why? What makes diversity, diversity or strength? If the diversity of the United States right now seems like it's kind of tearing us apart.
Right.
So
and it's not that it need to be a weakness either. It's just
right.
Why is it any one thing in particular? Either or.
Yeah.
It's like, I just not see it. Even in all honesty, the diversity of thought. It's like within certain confines, yes,
right.
You can have a lot of diversity of thought because you need a certain diversity of thought for iron to sharpen iron, as it were, for there to be good solid debate, so that you can improve your position and your opponent can improve theirs, and maybe eventually you find something better that you can both share in common.
Right.
But again, if it expands beyond certain confines, you're both speaking gibberish to each other. Right.
Yeah. And if you can't reason an insane person out of their insanity.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it comes back to, you gotta have that fundamental worldview similarity in order to be cohesive, right? Like, having even ideologically, having ideological diversity for the sake of ideological diversity is still bad. Just as having skin color diversity for the sake of having skin color diversity is bad.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. It's like, can we just, I don't know, not worry so much about that? It's like, you're a fit or you're not.
Right.
Plain and simple. So anyway, as we come to a close here, after cracking open that particular can of worms,
Right. Yeah.
I feel like I just walked into a Stephen Molyneux podcast.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
But right now, in addition to obviously doing all of the standard things like making sure you're prepared for whatever the heck it is that happens next, at this point we may go to, I don't know if by the end of the year we're going to be at war with each other, China, or aliens, or all of the above. Who knows? At this particular point, obviously make sure you're prepared for what the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario that you can imagine. Have a plan for that, because who knows what the hell 2020 is going to throw at us next. But also, we've got to think beyond that. We've got to think beyond the collapse of America, and we've got to think to what happens after that. What are we going to do? What are we going to build off of? What are our principles going to be? What do we want to preserve from not just the greats of Western civilization that we probably all agree on should be preserved, but what are we going to preserve out of the current culture even? And we need to start building these new microcultures around this sort of thing. Find the people who you share a worldview with. Most commonly, it's going to be people you share religion with, to be perfectly honest. It just is. But it may be something else too. If you're an atheist, maybe you do want to find just a group of people who share particular love of art or whatever. I don't know. Whatever it is, find your tribe. Find your tribe. Find the people that you share a worldview with, and start building around that. And not just on social media. This is fundamentally important. Social media is good. It's useful, but also do it locally. Do it in real life. We're going to need to do that, because the social media thing, it is entirely possible that this is going to be taken away from us as a possible way to network, and as a possible way to network with each other, unless we are on board with the far left. It is entirely possible that we're all going to get booted off of it, and we will be denied access to these platforms. We're going to need our allies living just a few blocks away from us.
Absolutely.
In the future. And they may meet your local DM group. Maybe you take over a neighborhood together. I don't know.
Exactly. Build your community where you are. Get to know your neighbors. That's one of the best things you can do. Get to know your neighbors and start building up that community. Yep. and focusing in on that, because that is what you can do. That's what we think that I was listening to Steve Deace talk about this, how the right, the Republican Party, the way everything goes seems to be like everything's focused on nationally, like the president, and it's of like, we can just get our guy get in there, and we can just make the magic couple of things happen, and poof, everything will be solved. And that's not how things are solved. You need to be at the local level doing the things. You need to be taking back your school boards. You need to be talking to your sheriffs. You need to be involved in your community and grow that community together, so that you can build. Because if you have a strong community, and crap hits the fan, and things go down and things start getting real bad, because hopefully they won't, but they could, what is going to get you through that? the community is going to get you through that if your community is together. And if not, then you're going to be in a world of trouble. And I hope you have a lot of guns and a lot of ammo, because otherwise it's going to be real rough for you. So that community building, community building together, getting to know your neighbors. That's what you got to do. You got to get those small groups, get them good, get in there and get them good, get involved, get in touch with people, and you'll be better off.
Yep. And who knows, maybe you need new neighbors out of the mix. You'll find out. Right now, to be honest, my neighbors are the ones that will feel very bad about reporting me to be taken off to the education camps.
Right. Yeah.
They will feel very, very bad about it. They'll be very concerned.
It's too bad it had to be this way.
They probably will be the ones who make the phone call.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but it's probably what's going to happen. So here we go. Hence why I'm, in a couple of years, we'll probably be moving elsewhere.
Right. And that's like to play into something a little bit more familiar. That's essentially what we're talking about, is how the doctrine of the lesser magistrate works.
Yes.
Like, that's essentially what we're talking about here, right?
And that honestly, I would love to get into that. We're already a little bit over time, and that actually is a whole nother episode. And I would actually love to get into that. So we're gonna have to schedule something where we do, in fact, get into that later on down the road here, because yes, it's a great concept, and we both listen to Dace, so I know exactly what you're talking about,
right?
And it would be a lot of fun to get into that. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, especially you, Pastor G. I did see you over there. It's just I didn't have a break, man. I saw you over there. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, everybody, for watching now or watching later. And we will be back next week with another guest. I'm not sure about what yet, but we'll see. We'll see what we come up with. All right. So, like I said,